Hello and welcome to the Week 10 preview episode of the Brit Iron Podcast. I'm your host James, and as ever I'm joined by my good friends Matt and Sam. Now before we jump into the news segment of today's episode, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the UKtouchdown.com. It is a great source for signed college football and NFL memorabilia in the UK. Everything on the website is 100% legit, fully certified, so you know exactly what you're getting for your money. And with Christmas coming up, it's a good place to pick up a nice little gift for a loved one in your life who, you know, may enjoy football a little bit. So I know I'll certainly be checking them out. I know the boys will as well. So go check them out, the UKtouchdown.com. Right, boys. It's a big news week this week. A few things to talk about to rattle through. And we'll start it off with a quarterback situation in Dallas. And that is that Andy Dalton is set to take the reins once again at the quarterback position, once he clears the concussion protocol and all that comes with it. But with their performance against the Steelers, does this mean that it doesn't really matter that he's coming back and their season's completely done?
Not at all for me. I think this is that game against the Steelers, for everything going on at the Cowboys. Like their boy's name Gilbert in at quarterback, who, fair enough, if you're going to have one NFL start, he put up a great fight against the unbeaten Steelers. They gave him more of a game than some other teams have so far. I think maybe it's just one of those kind of almost the story and the occasion of it. Just there was so little expectation on the Cowboys. They came out, punched the Steelers in the face and said, right, let's play some football. But I think the fact they managed to do that, there'll be a little bit of confidence on those players. And then the upgrade at quarterback to, we don't know what we'll see from Dalton. Tiny sample size of him at the Cowboys. I think obviously he can settle into this. He'll kind of get back to more his Andy Dalton level, someone edge where he was that kind of middle line, just decent enough quarterback. In that division, it's all still to play for. Yeah. This is not season done. This is season starting for me.
That's the key thing, isn't it? It's the in that division. This is, I mean, you pick any four of these teams and their season's dead. Like, their season is dead. Someone is going to make the playoffs out of them, but they're not going to win anything. They're going to get one round into the playoffs and they're going to be done. So I think from one perspective, yes, the Cowboys season's over. No one expects them to go any further than the wild card round. From another perspective, if Dalton comes back and the Cowboys can kind of start playing more consistently like they did against the Steelers, then yeah, they've got a shot to go on and win this division because everybody else in that division is a train wreck, and it's going to be whoever can suck the least.
Yeah, ultimately. But also it comes down to maybe not just the quarterback position as well. It's the running back spot. You know, Ezekiel Elliott has not really performed as well as we'd have liked him to this season. I know a lot of Dallas fans would agree. So maybe with Dalton coming in, you know, he's definitely a decent quarterback. He definitely did the job, and maybe Zeke performing a little bit better. You guys are right. This division is not out of reach from at all. They're one win off the top, so you know it's in their hands right now to reach it. They just got to perform and get all those pieces performing together.
Exactly.
I hope that O-line can get a little bit healthier as well. I think they've lost a few pieces there, which I think is as that maybe starts to settle in. They get used to that. They should help Zeke and obviously Dalton as well. So
if Zeke can just cut down on those fumbles, that will really help.
Yeah,
that will really help, because I think this is a team that does run through Zeke. So if Zeke can cut down on the fumbles and they can have more confidence to give him the ball and allow him to run, then that will just open up everything else, because they do have great weapons at wide receiver, and their defense started to look more confident against the Steelers. So maybe there is a chance they can fight back and win enough games to put them in a spot to at least compete in the division.
Yeah, you can certainly see it happening. Okay, another bit of news coming out this week is the quarterback situation in Washington this time. And that is that Alex Smith will be starting next week, or this week I should say, with Kyle Allen out for the year with a nasty injury, dislocated ankle I think it was. It was a horrible looking...
Yeah.
It was a lot worse at the time as well in terms of like that. You're thinking broken straight away, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe grimacing a little bit when I saw it.
Looks like it's one of those situations that you love to see, but you hate to see. You love to see Alex Smith getting his shot and coming back in, and it's the comeback story, and that's the aspect that you go, oh, isn't it great? You hate to see Kyle Allen going down with this injury. You hate to see the way that it happened, because, like you said, James, it did look horrible.
Yeah.
Luckily, it was just a dislocation. It wasn't anything. It's not like we're talking about something that's potentially as nasty as what Alex Smith himself had. But whether this changes their prospects going forward, I'm a little bit unsure. I'm not sure if Alex Smith is necessarily a massive upgrade just because he has been out of football for so long. He hasn't looked great when he's come in. I mean, he threw a touchdown, I think it was at the weekend, and he looked okay. But I'm not sure necessarily whether this is a step up for the football team. I do this every time. Literally every time.
But you don't do it on Sundays. That's the weird thing.
No, I don't do it on Sundays. Well, it's when it's on the team. When it's on the screen,
pressure.
it just says Washington. I'm like, oh, just Washington. But yeah, I think this is kind of a sideways step for Washington. I think Kyle Allen is obviously the younger guy with a bit less experience, but a bit more maybe he's more in that zone. But I mean, if Alex Smith can get back to where he was playing a couple of years ago, then potentially this could again put the Washington in a spot that they could compete in the division because it's such a trash division.
I think I'm not quite as. I think this is an upgrade for Washington. I think Kyle Allen hadn't really shown anything in the time he had there over what Haskins had shown, really. And when Smith came in, I think there was a point watching it where it's like, well, hang on, he's actually having an alright game here. He put up a decent amount of yards. Obviously, I think there was a pick in there, so needs to refine things a little bit. But I think coming in under those circumstances of seeing that kind of injury, that's almost like he's made his comeback, and then the next time he comes in, it's in bad circumstances again, almost seeing the guy he's probably been mentoring a little bit have what could be at the time, he doesn't know, oh, that could be the same injury. Especially the way the impact looked like it hit higher up his leg, and then with his ankle spinning, that's why I think for a lot of people, it's like there could be a lot shattered inside that leg right now with how it looked. It's obviously still not a great destination. It's not easy to come back from, but it is better. So I think the fact he came in, looked right with that, now with him going in, everyone knows he's going to be starting, getting the reps. I think for me, this is an upgrade. I don't think it's anything ridiculous, but it's like we said for the Cowboys. It's quite similar situations. If you just get Dalton or Smith anywhere about 80% of how they used to play, it's probably an upgrade on like what they've had just now. I would say for me, to me, I would take Alex Smith over Kyle Allen any day, just because in Alex Smith there's that bit more of an upside there.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this just continues the Alex Smith comeback story, and if he can lead to win the division, and he's odds-on favourite or under evens favourite at least to be the comeback player of the year if he's not already. So you'd love to see that at the very least, I think, in my opinion anyway. Right, final news piece of the week. We touched on it a little bit last episode, the trade deadline. We were expecting a few big moves, but it turned out to be a very, very quiet day. So not much to talk about there. We said we were going to feature some, but is there any that you guys want to bring up? Any little moves that happened?
The one thing that I wanted to mention, which I found interesting about this, obviously when kind of going through and we do these, I was a bit gutted that there wasn't anything to put in to really have a chat about any big trades, anything like that. Most years, it's becoming more common in the modern NFL that you do get more blockbuster trades and stuff, but it's a very quiet year for that. I was very interested to see that the Packers didn't make a move for a receiver, because I think they are potentially a receiver away from just being the best team in the league at this point. So the fact that they couldn't make a deal for Will Fuller, even though that was in discussion, that has come out that the Texans were talking about trading Fuller. It's also come out that Deshaun Watson would not have been happy if they traded Will Fuller. So I think that's very interesting from a couple of standpoints. The fact that Green Bay didn't make the move to get hold of a guy, if not Will Fuller, anyone, and the fact that the Texans were willing to stick Fuller on the trade block, knowing that Deshaun Watson, that's his guy. So I just think they're quite interesting, and a little bit sad that we didn't get to have that trade on the bill.
I think the bigger thing that came out, and obviously this wasn't really around the trade, it was just after the trade deadline, I think, was all JJ Watt's comments about, I'm not here for a rebuild. If you're rebuilding, get me out, essentially. He's like, I want what's best for me and for the franchise. But that was the underlying message, was if you're going to rebuild, I don't have time for that. And I think that's something that's going to be, the second this season finishes, that becomes interesting to watch, especially with the Texans. Who knows what they could get for him? I mean, he's a premier talent within the league, that if you're in a window, any team almost would want him in there. Yeah. With them not having that first and second round picks, I think I know how they're going to be trying to price him. And I think that was the issue with Fuller, was I think they probably wanted to try and fill potentially that second round pick void. Maybe that third, they wanted a high-end pick, is what everything in the news was, where the Packers were like, we're thinking mid-round. So that's going to be the interesting thing, is where the Texans value JJ Watt against everyone else. Because I think player of that time, they're going to be trying to get a premier pick. Like a good first couple round, but he's an older player.
He's an old guy,
that's
so
the issue.
Maybe they are overvaluing players, especially Will Fuller. I think for the talent, he's definitely probably still worth a second or a third rounder.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
You've got the injury questions, and we have seen what he is in the league. So you're probably not going to garner that kind of tender. And with JJ Watt, again, he's an aging player, so you're probably not going to get a top half kind of draft pick. But you could probably still flip him for a fourth and loosen up some cap. But I think it was just interesting that none of these moves did happen, and everything around the league kind of stayed as it is. I'm wondering maybe if that's because of the COVID thing, the fact that you get that extra week before you can bring a player in, so the allure of bringing in a big guy who you're bringing in just for an 8-game stretch to try and push you over just this year maybe isn't quite as tempting.
I think with the cap situation as well, all teams I think are starting to now expect we might have less cap room next year if it's all being talked about. So if you trade, bring in a big name, depending on what terms you're bringing them in on, that's either a rental for a season or it's going to put you in a nightmare spot that someone else has got to go if their contract runs beyond. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just everything with COVID. Is I reckon next year, hopefully if things is back to normal, we'll probably have a busy deadline again. I think it's just one
fingers crossed.
COVID effect.
Give us something to talk about next.
Exactly.
This time next year. But it's interesting. The Packers have a history of wasting their draft picks. This could actually be a time to send draft picks across that actually get you some value, but wasn't to be, unfortunately. So maybe next year. You have to wait a whole year, but we're willing to do it. Right then, boys, let's move on.
Hold up. You're not skipping that this week. You're not getting round this, mate. I need to make this known.
Go on.
We are now 9 weeks gone in the NFL season, moving into week 10. The Jets, for the first time in NFL history, have started out at 9, and somehow their head coach, Adam Gase, is still in a job. I know I harken on about this every week, but get him out.
Keep it moving. Done.
Yep.
Cool.
Sam's had his piece.
I can't believe he tried to skip over that.
I can't believe you're still harping on about it.
It's
still put it in
he's
the
going
notes.
to be there until the end of the season. It's done. You're going to have to accept it.
Doesn't mean
You're
I'm
not
happy
doing this
about
every
it,
week.
and doesn't mean I'm going to shut up about it.
Well, I think we all wish you would on that one, mate.
We'll put out a poll on Twitter. Come and vote. Should I just cut out Sam's Adam Gase rants every time? Just we can let him do it. Please him.
No.
And then just cut it out for you guys. It's up to the viewers. We'll leave that one with you.
I know where I'm voting, and I think it's fairly obvious. But
You don't get a vote.
Right, let's move in to the main part of the episode, the Week 10 preview. Exciting times, and we'll kick it off with the Colts going into Tennessee to play the Titans. Now, I saw a fact this week that the Colts have lost to both teams within records that they've faced this season in the Ravens and the Bears. So this will be the third time they're coming up a team with a winning record in their Titans. Do you reckon that trend of losing to these sort of teams will continue going into this game?
I think it does. The Colts for me they're a well-coached team that have got a couple of really serious flaws, and this is the kind of team that is going to win all of the games that they're supposed to win. So every single game that you go in and you think, yep, the Colts are going to win this, they're going to win it because they're well-coached, they've got decent defense. But all of those games that coming into the season, I might have said, this is a coin flip game, or this is two very good teams going up against each other. I don't think the Colts are going to win. I think the Colts, every time they come up against a proper contending team, I think they're going to lose. Because I just don't have the faith in Rivers to kind of when the time comes for him to really sling the ball, he can't throw the ball anymore. I don't think they necessarily play the best to their win condition, which is run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. They're not necessarily giving their backs enough opportunity to just run them to victory. So I'm taking the Titans here, and I think at -1.5, the Titans, that's a really generous line for the Titans.
Oh, it's a steal for me. I think that line, for me, it would more make sense if that was maybe a 3.5, sort of edge out the potential field goal win. But at 1.5, I'll be jumping on that. I think it's sort of with the Colts, I agree with everything you just said there. And it's sort of, we did our season previews, and that was, I think, what I thought when about the Rivers pickup was, I think in those big games, I think to tip them over the edge, it doesn't. He's not reliable, and it's seeming that way. Whereas the Titans got through that game with the Bears, which was a trap game to really derail their season if they'd come off that and gone for a couple of losses in a row. Got it back on track. Another good game against the Colts here. It's not an easy game, but another one. If you get the win, starts to make you think, yep, we can compete. We're still there, and I think that they know their win condition. They know how to play. AJ Brown looks like an absolute monster out there. Like, he looks unstoppable. Like you talk about DK Metcalf, I think AJ Brown's right up there in terms of from that class who's really coming out so far.
Yeah. And they're a different passing offense when he's on the field as well. Yep. It just everybody else in that wide receiver core seems to play better with AJ Brown on the field, and I think we saw this was at the start of the season. He missed a couple of games, and then when he came back in, it might have been 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was Corey Davis had a big week, but you could see from week to week the difference in the way they play. Having AJ Brown just opens everything up for all of the other receiving options. So I think AJ Brown is, like you say, huge for this passing offense.
It'll be interesting to see how defenses start to react as well, because early on in the season, Jonnu Smith was just tearing teams apart, and I think as AJ Brown's come back in, you can see I think teams are still trying to shut down Jonnu Smith, but saying like, well, hang on, and I think that's why AJ Brown's he's a great player. I think he's looking very good, but I think defense is going to have to start to warm towards him a bit as well. And it's going to be interesting to see, but I think you're going to, at this point, just the athlete that he is, you're going to have to put him in double coverage. But I think this is a kind of game as well. So going back to the betting front, I'm betting the under here. So at 49, I don't see them clearing that. I think this is going to be a bit of a defensive match, a bit of a one where they're both trying to run the ball, that sort of gritty, sort of week 10 sort of match. But you start to get towards this business end of the season. But I think comfortably for the Titans, they should walk through this and kind of keep their season going.
Yeah, I'd be looking for Derrick Henry as well to have a better game out than he did last week. I think he was a bit quiet, didn't really get as much done as he normally does. So I think that is also a big part of it for the Titans. But we all know what Derrick Henry can bring, so I think he's fully capable of doing that this week. And I tend to agree with you guys as well. Taking the Titans at minus 1.5 is such a steal on this one. Not completely sold on the Colts for all the reasons you mentioned there, Sam, as well. So Titans definitely in this game. Looking to bet on them for sure. Right, that is the Thursday night football game that we just covered there. Let's move into Sunday's games. We have a 6 p.m. matchup where the Washington football team, go in to face the Detroit Lions. Now, we've talked a little bit about Washington already and the quarterback position, and the fact that Alex Smith will be starting this game. Dwayne Haskins obviously backing him up. So, I mean, there's potential to see him, but I think Smith will be the guy on the day. Now, this Lions pass defense have a terrible 17-5 touchdown to interception ratio. So I feel like Alex Smith is primed for a good game here to take advantage of that.
I think I actually agree with you. Just through, I mean, you say they're not giving up. They're not exactly ball hawks. They're giving up 17 touchdowns to 5 interceptions you said on the season. That's not great numbers. Alex Smith had good numbers against the Giants at the weekend, and I think the Giants are actually a relatively competent defense. You've got a couple of players on that Giants team that they're not great, but they're stepping up and they're making plays consistently, and the Giants are in pretty much every game that they're playing in at the moment. Not sure that can be said about the Lions. I think if Alex Smith comes back and he plays like he did last week, and a couple of the Washington receivers step up, Terry McLaurin, I think we could potentially look to see him really, really exploit some of these more inexperienced Detroit cornerbacks. Then I think especially with the football team being the football team are actually underdogs here at plus 3.5. I think that's quite an interesting lean. I think I might be tempted to put some money on that.
Yeah, for me, I'm taking this Washington football team at that plus 3.5. I think moneyline, I'd take the Lions. I could see this coming down to a field goal. That I think it's going to be tight. I think it'll be a field goal either way. I think sort of maybe hedging my bets that way. I think it's another game for the under potentially. I think this could just be scrappy. Maybe it's going to come close, but I could see this being just over 20 points apiece. The over-under is at 46.5. But yeah, I'm really liking Washington going into this game. I think the Lions are in a weird spot. Just coaching issues. Just that the win against Atlanta was gifted to them. There's loads of issues, and I think Matt Patricia, it might be long. I think he's under some threat in that job. I think this could be the game that really, really turns up the heat on him. If you get beaten by this Washington football team, like, people are going to ask questions. And I think, as much as, against the Giants, they did look good. Jabril Peppers on the side of the Giants, we'll get to him later, but monster performance. I think potentially without him out there, Washington football team take that game. I think it was just almost a breakout, standout performance from him for me. He seemed everywhere. But he said, receivers step up. Antonio Gibson, great opportunity for him to really start to as well complement what Alex Smith could get going passing if Detroit really try and shore up that their defense against the passing attack. Gibson could run him. So it's going to be interesting. I think there's a lot more options on the side of Washington to take this than on Detroit. And I think Vegas might have this one wrong a little bit for me.
They've definitely got it wrong. This is definitely my lock of the week, I think.
Oh, really?
Going for an underdog lock.
Spicy.
Just don't like that Lions pass defense. Like, seeing those stats doesn't fill me with confidence. And, give Alex Smith a full week, knowing that he's going to be the starter, knowing preparing for this game. I think we can see him really take advantage. Underdogs, so they're already at plus 3.5, like you said there, Matt. So, I can't see anything but Washington winning this game. But normally when I say that, it goes the other way. But hey ho, let's see what happens. And maybe Matt Patricia will be out of a job for Adam Gase after this one. We'll see.
You put your neck on the line making that a lock, mate. That is a very bold lock.
Hey, that's what these locks have got to be sometimes. Don't want to go for the easy ones,
That's what they're here for. Otherwise, every week, and it would be Steelers. I'm locking the Steelers or something
like
that.
Play the
We want these spicy locks.
Exactly. So I'm expecting the same from you boys. Otherwise, I'll be very disappointed this week. Right, let's shift things along to the Texans going in to play the Cleveland Browns. Fresh off a bye, of course, the Browns are. Chubb potentially coming back in for the Browns, which I love to see. Been waiting for him to come back for so long in fantasy. But potentially on the other side of the ball for the Texans, which could be a bit of a cause for concern, is that David Johnson might miss this game through concussion. At which point I'm then favouring the Browns because Duke Johnson didn't really fill me with confidence last week. What do you boys take of that?
I think this is another spread that I can't believe. The Browns at -3 going into this. I might even try and get this on like an alternate handicap. I think I would be happy taking them at anywhere up near 6.5, maybe 7. Wow. I really think the Browns take this. The Texans struggled to beat that Jags team, led by Jake Luton, who he played well, but that Jags team is, I think, if the Texans are anything like what we were maybe thinking they are, I was quite hard on them for this year. I liked them. I thought there'd be something interesting going on there. That's a game you've got to be comfortably taking.
Yeah.
Whereas this Browns team, I think, especially if Chubb comes back, but even without it, Kareem Hunt shown he can get it done. I think they take this comfortably.
See, it's funny. I agree with you, and I think the Cleveland Browns, this is a very comfortable win for them. But I don't actually think that Chubb, in fact, if anything, from Chubb's perspective, I would prefer that he didn't play this week, because from all reports, he's kind of like he's in that spot where they're saying, we could play, but is he going to be healthy? Sit him out. This is not a game that you need him back. This is a game I think the Browns need to win because they need to stay on that track to be keeping them up, keeping them in that race to be in a good spot for the playoffs, because I think they are a playoff caliber team, especially in a year where we've got a lot of teams around the NFL just playing subpar football. I think the reason the Browns are going to win this and going to win this quite comfortably is actually their defense. I think Garrett is going to have an absolute field day. Garrett is up there at the moment this year for being one of the contenders for Defensive Player of the Year. He's causing havoc. You've got a secondary that's starting to get healthy again. Denzel Ward has made the last couple of games has made some plays that you watch and you go, that's why they took him so high. That is what they do the best. And the way that he plays, which is aggressive to the ball, he's not a great tackler, so he won't tackle people in the open field. But when you've got Deshaun Watson slinging the ball up, because all he can do is get on the run and sling the ball up and hope one of his receivers comes down for it, the type of defending you need is someone who's going to play the ball in the air and break passes up, which Denzel Ward does better than a lot of players in the league. So I think the defense is where they're going to win this. They'll run the ball, control time of possession. They'll play a very, very solid kind of pass rush, which is going to force the Texans to just heave the ball up there. And I'm not sure that the Texans have got kind of the offensive power to come down with a lot of those.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said there. If anything, it just reassures me that taking the Browns at -3 is the play to make this week. And like Matt said, that seems awfully short for them. I'd be taking them a lot more, maybe even touchdown or around that area, around the 7 area. So it's interesting to see them at -3. But maybe Vegas knows something that we don't. You never know that. But I'll be
on
happy
track
to.
record. Yes, Vegas. You're
probably right.
It's the week for the Brit Iron boys.
Yeah. This is the week. This is it.
Vegas, please.
Right, let's move things on to the team that the Texans faced last week in the Jaguars, who are going in to play Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, Packers. I mean, those two are looking like an elite combo, just to say there, because they're lighting it up this year, which is great to see. But Luton Mania, is that a thing we're going to see? He did all right last week.
He looked good. Mania, one game, he did all right. Luton Mania.
I mean, the way I see it, this game is just too far out of reach for any quarterback in that room, regardless of who it is. So, it's almost a gimme for Packers at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean,
it's got to be.
Davante Adams is making the case to be the best receiver in the league at the moment. He really is. Because, I mean, every game, there is no other team that has a receiver that is so, because the way to beat the Packers at the moment is basically stick 3 men on Davante Adams and then force one of the other receivers to have to try and run themselves open, because nobody else on that team seems to be... everything that's happening is either Davante Adams doing it or Aaron Rodgers making a play. So... theoretically, the idea of just stick as many guys as you can on Davante Adams, maybe the Jags have got a chance, but realistically, the way these guys are playing, I think I'm taking the Packers, and I think I'm taking them to cover at -14 as well.
Yeah, I think you'd be an idiot to bet any form of against or just fully with the Packers in this. I think I'm also taking the over with it set at 53.
Oh, really? See, I'd take the under because I just...
No, over.
Really?
Definitely over on this. I think Rodgers will light them up. I think as well, this Jags team, like the Packers defense isn't an elite defense in the league. It's solid, but I think there will be a couple moments. I think the Jags will put up some points here. I think they'll get into the double figures. Maybe not much beyond that. Enough that I would say, can the Packers potentially cover 40 odd on their own? Yes. I think in this matchup they can. The way that they're playing, I think the way that Rodgers has bounced back since that Bucs game, especially.
Yeah, I think for me...
he's got that chip. It was almost like he already had that chip on his shoulder. The Bucs game happened, the internet cancelled him, and he said, okay, I got a chip on each shoulder now, let's go.
Yeah.
This is an interesting conversation as well, just because, and this will come up later in the episode, I'm sure, but we're week 10 now, we're halfway through the season, a lot of teams have played 8 games, some teams played 9. Is Aaron Rodgers the front runner for the MVP now, given the way that Russell Wilson's had a couple bad weeks? Obviously, Josh Allen's played so up and down. Tom Brady has played so up and down. Obviously, he had that stretch, but he's had a couple terrible games. Is Aaron Rodgers the front runner?
I was trying to think of any other guys that I could put in that category other than Rodgers at this point, and it's really hard to argue against the Rodgers argument.
Yeah. I
think that connection with Davante Adams is pretty key to that as well. But you can still do it without him. I think that's the thing. And like you say, there's other guys have had off weeks, have had bad weeks, have had down weeks. I don't think you can put it past Aaron Rodgers at this point until he has a similar spell as the likes of Josh Allen and Russell Wilson.
And the thing is as well, I feel like I want to make an argument for Russell Wilson, because we all know I'm a big Russell Wilson guy. He's put up massive numbers He's put up massive numbers this year, but even I'm sat here going, but Aaron Rodgers has just been more consistent and is doing so much more with less.
I think for me, there's no front runner right now. I think everyone in and around it has had good and bad. I think Mahomes, quietly, the last few weeks especially, is putting up massive numbers. I think it's to a point as well with Mahomes, and it sounds mad to say, but even beyond Rodgers and Wilson, it's such an expected level and a stat line to see from him.
Yeah.
But I think he's someone to keep an eye on with it, because I think it's going to come down at the end of the season. One, if you get a surprise shot team that get into the playoffs to have that kind of a run, or just a player comes into a team, completely turns it around. There's always those underdog sort of bits that come out of there. I think right now it's a complete dead heat between all of them. Like, there is no one guy for me that's edging it, and I think he should be it. I think because they've all had down weeks, and that the down weeks all cancel each other out to me. I think between those big sort of three that you could call the front runners, maybe four if you throw Josh Allen in there, but I think his down weeks went on a bit longer, and I think even outside of that, just maybe it's a bit too critical in his play, but just some of the decisions, I don't think he's MVP yet. Still had some moments where I'd say he's almost maybe the one that's not lost them games, but made them a lot harder than they need to be with some of the fumbles and just things he does that are a bit silly. But that top three for me, it's dead heat currently.
Yeah, it's definitely close. And that's a great question there, Sam. And maybe if you're listening, you could put in the comments below who you think is the front runner for MVP.
Yeah, let us know.
We'd love to see your thoughts on the matter.
And we'll tell you why you're wrong.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a conversation rather than doing that, Sam. But we'll see what they say. But just to bring it back to this game, I agree as well. Packers -14. I'm definitely taking that. You can't see past them. The spread as well, I agree with you, Matt. I think even though it's fairly high at 53, I think the Jaguars will put up maybe a touchdown or two, just because this Packers defense is statistically in middle of the range, so they have got the opportunity to do that, maybe on the grounds with James Robinson. But yeah, I think over definitely, and Packers on the spread 100% for me as well. Right, we've got a little divisional matchup here, one that is of interest to Sam, of course, in the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles are going in to play the New York Giants this week. Giants, of course, off the back of their second win of the season against the Washington football team, as we have mentioned. Now, for your Giants, Sam, is it worth fighting for that number one spot? Or is there maybe more advantageous just to tank? Because strength of schedule, they're probably not going to be top of that division. And if they make it to playoffs, they won't get any further. Is it worth tanking from here on in?
I don't necessarily think it is. I think the number one pick is locked up now. The Jets are getting the number one pick. I don't think anyone really... I think the Jets are tanking for the number one pick.
Well, I think it's bad.
We are not getting the number one pick. Yeah. I am not of the thinking that Justin Fields, who would be the next guy, because really that's the question. Is it time to move on from Daniel Jones? I'm not necessarily... I haven't seen enough from Justin Fields to make me go that he is 100% more NFL ready than Daniel Jones. So I wouldn't tank. I would keep playing, and if we end up with the second overall pick or the third overall pick and Justin Fields is there, then yes, I'd consider and I'd think about it. But there are so many other issues offensively with this team, namely the offensive line. So
still,
I mean, I'm very much of the opinion that you could probably chuck Justin Fields behind there and he would get trampled. You could chuck Trevor Lawrence behind there and he would get trampled. There's a lot of everything that's going on at the moment that Daniel Jones is just getting hammered because he does make some terrible decisions and he fumbles the ball loads, and it's tricky to see because you do see flashes from him. But this is a team that we're not getting the number one pick, but our division's open. We might still be able to win the division. So just do everything you can to win this season, because maybe Daniel Jones shows something, maybe some of the other guys on the roster. And if we're in the spot that we're picking at number 2 in a couple of months, then maybe we consider it. But I still think this is actually a better team than the record shows. We've been in pretty much every game we've played, and like Daniel Jones keeps getting the ball with an opportunity to win these games. And yeah, he throws a silly pick, or he fumbles the ball, or something happens that means we don't. But the fact that we are in those games is in stark contrast to teams like the Cowboys, who for the most part haven't been in their games, or the Jets, who, I mean, they just haven't been in their games. So I actually think this is a game the Giants win. I don't think the Eagles are good at all. I think Carson Wentz is playing the worst football of his career, and at this point, I think it's going to be a bad game of football. This is going to be a competition between either quarterback to see who can turn the ball over the least. And I actually think at this point, Daniel Jones might turn it over less than Carson Wentz.
So I'm kind of the other side of this equation, and maybe quite drastically, because this is my lock of the week for the Eagles.
Go on.
I think the fact that Rager is now getting in there and he's back, and this Eagles team has had a chance to start getting healthy, getting a couple pieces back, I think they're taking this. And I think with that, where that spread's at, I'll be taking on that -3.5 happily for me. And I really think this is where we start to get back to sort of what you've seen at points from the Eagles, that late season Eagles, where they just seem to maybe just kind of get almost a bit of a boost all round. They just seem to start to play better. I think there is risk that Wentz tries to do too much, tries to overdo it, and it goes wrong. But I think now he's got a couple names there with Rager, Fulham, and then Greg Ward. There's a couple names that he knows he can throw a ball to, so he's maybe going to not be getting himself in that headspace as much. But at the same time, I won't be shocked if the Giants win this, just because that defense is starting to look better. But I need to see it consistently. I need to see, as we mentioned, Jabril Peppers, who had a standout performance every week, being noticed, because there's been a couple flash plays, but that's the first time watching like Reds or whatever. It seems like whenever it cuts to that game and the Giants are on defense, he is on your screen. He's the guy that if he's not making the play, he's nearby. He's in shot. So the Giants could do it. And I think there is a chance that their defense steps up. Wentz has a shocker. But I don't think that's what happens here. And I think the Eagles take it nicely.
I'm with you on this one as well. And we've always talked this whole season about how the Eagles have been plagued by injuries, and that's why they're sort of suffering quite a bit, and they will win the division if they can get these people healthy. And it's starting to happen now. You know, Lane Johnson is going to come in and play this game. It's pretty much confirmed. Miles Sanders is going to be back for this game. Isaiah Samalo is going to be back for this game as well on the O-line to help keep Carson Wentz up. So I think those three, as well as the ones you've mentioned, Matt, are big additions to this team that are really going to help them beat the Giants. Of course, Giants do as well have Devontae Freeman coming back in for this game. So there is that on the Giants side of the ball.
Exciting.
It's another option in the run game, you know. It's you signed him for a reason. But I think those names coming back for the Eagles, it makes this team a lot more complete than they were a few weeks ago, and maybe means their record's a bit misleading, just because of all the injuries they've had plagued with them. So yeah, I'm taking the Eagles as well, Matt. I think that's a great pickup here. But Sam, you never know, mate. It could happen.
Man, I do think the Giants win. I think the people that don't win is anybody that watches this game. I don't think this is not going to be a good game to watch. But to be honest, we're going to say this about every single NFC East matchup this year. It's going to be a bad game of football. You might get some excitement in the deads if it comes down to a score and it's either team trying to see doesn't fumble it away, but this is not one I'm looking to watch, and that's from a Giants fan.
Oh, that's very telling.
Oh, wow.
That is really telling. Well, maybe we should move on to a game that one of us is definitely going to watch, and that is the Buccaneers going in to play the Panthers at 6 p.m. on Sunday. Buccaneers, of course, off the back of that disappointing Week 9 loss against the Saints. It was
generous calling it disappointing. I think there's a lot of other words I'd be picking before disappointing. It
was a shock to wake up to see it. It was only a field goal that the Buccaneers could get done, and the Saints tearing you guys apart. But, you know, CMC might be out for this game. Christian McCaffrey, that shoulder injury is hitting him a little bit harder than we thought. Could be out for this game. Does that make a difference? And do you feel a bit more comfortable knowing that, Matt, going into this game?
I think it's definitely a help. Because he came straight back and looked like he was just ready to go again. It seemed like he hadn't missed a beat, really. So I think for any team playing like without CMC, you're gonna be like, brilliant. That's good. Like without their star, he is their star player. So that's always going to be of benefit. But I mean, Mike Davis has shown he can cover at a pretty similar level. So I don't think it necessarily changes a huge amount of that, and you're still going to have to defend against it in a similar way. I think for me, it's becoming an interesting tale of two seasons for the Bucs, depending on whether we're on prime time or just a regular 6 o'clock game. It almost seems like we're a bit scared of the dark on all fronts. Like the second you put us in prime time, players aren't executing as they should be. Coaching wise, it just seems like there's some weird decisions being made. Just, I think we're getting out. Like that game against the Saints, the main problem is we got out coached. Obviously players didn't execute well enough, but I think there's a lot of it that comes down to the coaching side of the ball. It was a bad loss, and it's another one that sets it back of us sort of almost away from where the expectation was building. And it sort of seems like whenever we get a little bit of rolling, we get humbled. That could come out and be good for us down the stretch to have these games early, learn these lessons early. But it's a worry because when you get to the playoffs, it's all prime time.
Yeah.
If you can't perform when the lights are brightest, what's the point? Like, you ain't going to win anything on a season. So it's going to be interesting to see how we adapt. But I think this has got to be a bounce back in division because this Panthers team can put up a fight and could come out of this with a win. And then suddenly it's a whole different look in this division. But I think we got enough to get through it. I think purely because it's not a primetime game. I think almost kind of get back, you kind of more mix in with the other coverage. It's not as big. Like, I think saw it on the coverage before the Bucks, and all new things with the stadium lighting, like all the stuff of setting it with this like red sort of lighting all across the ground. They were building it up as something massive because obviously it was a huge game. And I just think it just seemed like everyone was in their own heads. Even down to Brady, who couldn't even find Evans. There's a couple of plays that I've seen like highlights of where Evans is just screaming down the middle, wide open, and Brady just can't find him. Yeah. So depends which Bucks show up for me, but I'm taking them. I think we do play well here, just because it's not a primetime game currently.
Yeah, I mean, the Bucks just got beat by the better team last weekend. The Buccaneers struggled offensively against what is becoming a pretty stout Saints defense, and with the Saints getting Michael Thomas back and kind of getting more in a rhythm and playing to what they do best, the Saints were just the better team, and the Bucks got beat out. And I think it was one of those games where kind of the perfect storm of everything came together at the right time for the Saints, and the Bucks had an off week, which then you have an off week against a really good team, and it makes it look so much worse. I think if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play like they did last week, but they're playing against let's say they're playing the Denver Broncos, then I think they probably still get the win, but they scrape it out, and it's one of these games where you go, oh, we're lucky to have escaped with a win there. So
like the Giants game.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not panicking with the Bucks, especially not against this Panthers team, because this Panthers defense isn't the Saints defense. This Panthers offense isn't the Saints offense. I think the Panthers will put up a lot of points, but like you said, I think it's going to be a bounce back game for the Tampa Bay defense, especially. The Buccaneers offense should be better. An extra week for Antonio Brown to get more on the right page. There were a couple of plays there where you could just kind of tell they're not, like Brady and AB weren't quite on the same page, and that is something that it comes with time. You can't expect him to come in 2 weeks into a system and just be the guy straight away. So that will help. I think the Bucks win it purely because of the Brady off the back of a loss factor. But long-term wise, that loss against the Saints worries me more, because whereas a couple of weeks ago I was going, right, the Bucks are now the team to beat in the NFC, maybe we've got to temper those expectations back and go, well, now there's 3 or 4 teams. I think divisional weekend this year for the NFC to see who makes that championship game is going to be really interesting.
Yeah,
100%.
For sure, yeah. I definitely agree as well. You're saying long term, definitely some concerns rising for your Buccaneers team, Matt. But I mean, this game, like you say, Sam, Brady to come out and have one of those bounce back games, but also sort of touched it as well. The Buccaneers defense is number 1 against the run. It's like top 15 against the pass. So I just can't look past that when I'm betting, and there's no way I'll be able to comfortably take the Panthers here. And to be honest with you, the spread at -6 for the Buccaneers, I think, is pretty good value for money as well. So I'm more than happy to take that.
Could easily be 7, and that I think once you hit the 7, anything north of 7, I'd be starting to worry a little bit more. But that's 6. 2 field goals is quite attainable. Yeah,
it should. In my opinion, it should definitely happen, just based on the talent this Buccaneers team has in general, anyway. But
a little fun point to keep a note of, though. Interesting stat I saw was 2002 season. Pretty good one for the Bucks. Lost both games to the Saints. So they're 6-2 last time that happened, and we all know what happened that year. So maybe it's just storylines lining up in the NFL as they like to. Who knows?
It's gonna be a
maybe
Super
that's
Bowl
just
year.
me being hopeful.
Bucks fans and their 1 Super Bowl.
All I'm saying is you said it at the NFC game. Any team can beat anyone. I think at the top of this NFC on their day. Like the fact, if you look at it, how we made the Packers look, how the Saints just made us look. You think, right, if the Saints and the Packers play, Saints must absolutely maybe Packers don't even put up any points.
Yeah,
because the way it all works out, I think it's whoever any given Sunday. It's going to be exciting
any
to
given
watch.
Sunday.
Got it out there.
We love it. We love it.
Cliche bingo. Check that one
We'll
off.
have to wait and see.
Coin flip.
there we go.
Anything else we want to get out there?
We waited halfway through the episode to use the first one, and I'm so here for it. Right, let's move into the 9 p.m. games. We'll start with a 9:05 kickoff in the UK. That is the Denver Broncos are going into Las Vegas, that nice shiny new stadium, to play the Raiders. And I mean, I've made my thoughts very clear on Carr this season, but he did continue with his impressive season last week in Week 9. He's currently at a 16 touchdown to 2 interception ratio, which is incredibly good, with about a 79% pass completion rate. Do you boys think he will be able to continue that in this game against the Broncos?
Yeah, for me. I mean, I don't think this Broncos defense is putting up anything terrifying, anything that makes me think even a quarterback playing what looks like maybe one of, statistically, easy to say, what will be one of his best years. Just purely once you look at the ratios of everything. I think on the front of it, for me, this game, you've got the Raiders who got out of there against the Chargers with that win on the call, which I think was the right call, but it came down very close against a Broncos team that seemed like a different team first to second half and seemed to always be able to down with Drew Lock. He doesn't do a lot, and then suddenly second half he's like, right, let's play some football.
Yeah.
And starts to put a lot of points on the board. I think this is a game that for the fourth quarter, you don't even need to watch the first 3. I reckon watch the fourth, because I think that is where this game is massively decided, and I'm actually going to edge it on the side of the Broncos. I think they get this done here. I think it is. I already cliched it. I said the word coin flip. I think I could see this going absolutely either way. But I think the fact that the Raiders only just got out of it against the Chargers, I think the Broncos got the edge over the Chargers when they played recently in that comeback. So I think maybe there's just enough for them to edge it and be able to potentially get them at +4.5. I think for me that's comfortable. I think money line, it's a different gamble. I think it's a different story potentially. Yeah. But when I'm talking spread, I'm betting the Broncos on the spread for this one for me. But I won't be shocked if I lose.
I wouldn't put money on this game just because the Broncos are just the ultimate trap game this year. There is not a single team that are going up against this Broncos team that I would feel comfortable betting on, purely because of that just wild swings in how they play. They've got some playmakers who can just... I mean, Jerry Jeudy, when he gets the ball, and he looks brilliant, and he's making catches that are really, really top level. And they've got some speedsters who can just pull things out of nowhere. And Drew Lock can come out and play a quarter where he's playing at MVP level. And the rest of the time he plays like a pretty bad quarterback who makes bad decisions. So it seems like it's a complete lottery with what you're going to get play to play with the Broncos. So I don't want to bet on it. I think the safe, logical bet is that the Raiders are the better team and Derek Carr is the better quarterback. And I mean, the big thing that I took from what James just said, 16-2, he's 2 interceptions all season. If you don't turn the ball over, you're going to give yourself a good chance to win games. So logically, you're taking the Raiders, you're taking them with the spread, quite comfortably. I like the Raiders in this game. But there is that just complete wild card of the Broncos, which scares me. So I think the Raiders win this game. I think they win it comfortably, but I'm not putting any money on it because the Broncos they could do anything.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it there, Sam, because I was thinking the exact same turn of phrase there when you said trap game. It definitely is a trap game. But whoever the Broncos face is always a bit of a coin flip, if you like Matt said there. But I do believe in this Raiders team and Derek Carr and Josh Jacobs and all the weapons that are on that offense to get it done. I probably would take him on the spread, -4.5, hesitantly, just because of everything we just mentioned there about the trap game and whatnot. But yes, it'll be a risky one, but I'm a bit more confident than you boys, I think, to take the Raiders here, for sure. Right, let's move in to another 9:05 game in the Bills going in to play the Cardinals. Bills at 7-2 on the season with a very nice win against the Seahawks. Yeah, probably it's massive. I wasn't going to say one of their biggest of the season so far, but it's got to be up there.
100%.
So are we now locking Bills up as contenders to go all the way this year? Or is this maybe a game that they're going to have to prove it a bit more against the Cardinals?
I'm gonna flip you on that one, and this is my lock of the week, and my lock is the Cardinals.
Ooh.
I I don't have the faith in Josh Allen's consistency. I don't think that the thing that we saw, which played out almost exactly like you said it would, James, is the Seahawks have a terrible pass defense, like really bad, right? And their starting cornerbacks are not good cornerbacks. It's that simple. Even with Jamal Adams back, they're just giving up yards and big plays left, right, and centre. The Cardinals are not that bad, and the Cardinals have got a couple players, Patrick Peterson, Budda Baker, who are good players, like Pro Bowl level players. So I think they will be able to hold that big play away from the Bills a little bit more. And basically, I think Josh Allen's the kind of guy who does really well when he gets those looks for the big plays. But the longer he has the ball and the more opportunities you give him to make a mistake, because you're not allowing the big play, I worry that the mistake is more likely to creep in, because I'm just not convinced yet that he's really consistent. He had a career game against the Seahawks. I'm not taking that away from him. He's been very up and down this season. But ultimately, for me, this just comes down to who I think is better between Kyler Murray and Josh Allen. And I think Kyler Murray is probably the better quarterback. So I'm going to give Kyler Murray the edge here at -1.5.
I'd 100% think, Kyler Murray for me looks the better quarterback. But it's two teams we've seen. That was two different versions of each team this year. They've had up and down games. I think it's really hard for me to read into this Cardinals result as well against the Dolphins, because we've seen two different performances now from Tua. One where he looked very capable, and one against the Rams where it was like, there was nothing really about it.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like, what does that say for me? Without seeing more of Tua, I can't really read too much into where the Cardinals are at right now. I think there is a risk if it was just Tua, maybe less Tua, more than Cardinals' defense is why Tua looks so good. That Josh Allen gets a bit of confidence back here, comes into this with his Bills team, and they keep it going. But not to the same extent they did. I think this is going to be a shootout. Yeah. I think this turns into a game that, for me, 55.5? I might be edged to take the over on this. I think both teams could put up, or what's that needing, just 27-ish each, just over that, around 28 mark.
I think it's like an implied points total of 30 for the Cardinals and 27 for the Bills.
For me, I'll take that.
Or a little bit more, but
around those figures. I think in terms of who wins this, I'm not betting on it. The only thing I'll take here is that over. I think I won't be shocked if either team wins. I think it really depends on which version of this Bills team shows up. I think if it's the team that just played the Seahawks, I think they've got enough firepower in that offense to take it, but they did do that against the Seahawks. Maybe it was just the right game as a get-right game that some teams need and they keep it moving now, or do they go back to the slump? There's too many what-ifs from both these teams. It's the Cardinals as well. You thought they're back on their way up. They had that little weird stint. Looked like they were getting better again, and then lose to the Dolphins, who knows, maybe it's just the Dolphins are getting to a good spot. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but there's too much to read into. That if I really, really had to pick, I'd say Bills, but it's like their game to lose for me, but I will not be at all shocked if they do.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one as well. Under-over, definitely taking that over. You know, it's like you say, it's going to be a high-scoring game. And when talking about the quarterbacks, I think I favour Kyler Murray in this game, which leads me to want to back the Cardinals on the spread, spread being at -1.5. I'm seeing some stats here actually about the Buffalo Bills' defense against rushing quarterbacks, which is quite interesting. So they've allowed 4 rushing touchdowns and 5.1 yards per carry on average to quarterbacks, which is not a good stat to have. So they're not very good against the likes of Kyler Murray.
Yeah. Who is the best rushing quarterback in the league at the moment.
Exactly. And that is in addition to allowing 67.8% of passes to be completed. So if he's not throwing it, and he's going to be running it, which they've not been very good at defending. So I think that plays into it for me, taking the Cardinals on this one. But yeah, it's a hard one to really judge and put a definite answer for who we think is going to win, just because it's two teams that are just going to go at it for the whole game.
We say they're going to go at it. This is going to be like a 9-3
a 0-0
fest, isn't it? Yeah.
Has the game ever ended 0-0 in modern
leg.
NFL? I can't think of one. This could be it. Who knows? But
FA Cup replay coming up.
God, we don't want that. We want a lot of points, please, lads. We want a lot of points in that one. Right, let's crack on to the final 9:05 game of the week. And it's a battle of two rookie quarterbacks as the Chargers go in to face the Dolphins. Which young quarterback are we backing to lead their team to victory? Is it going to be Justin Herbert for the Chargers or Tua for the Dolphins?
I hate what I feel like I've got to say here. My heart is I don't know why. This Chargers team with Herbert I really like. I love everything I'm seeing from him. But this Dolphins team is rolling. And I've got to roll with them. I've got to take the Dolphins. I've got to put it on Tua. I said it earlier, we've seen two sides of Tua in his 2 games. Obviously, it's such a small sample size, you can't read massively into either. But what he did step up and do, there was a couple of questionable decisions early. A few moments, like that weird pick that got called back, where he went to throw it out the sideline and it just sort of seemed to end up in a guy's hands. But then he bounced back from him and he looked good. He looked, I think, obviously when we were watching it, sometimes it looked like college Tua at points. He looked comfortable. I think that's the biggest thing. So I think I've got to go with the Dolphins here, and that where that spread sat at -2.5, where they're coming off these consecutive wins and they're really getting some momentum. They're chasing down the Bills. I think I've got to bet with the momentum here for me, whereas the Chargers seem to be in games, but they don't win games. Yeah, it just seems like there are a couple, I don't know, coaching adjustments or just a couple extra players. They could have a great draft pick this year in what's already a competitive team in all these games. They seem like a year or two away.
This is a Dolphins team that's quietly got a really good defense. Like, a really good defense. Now, what is the thing that causes rookie quarterbacks the biggest issue? Is good defenses. I could very easily see Herbert coming out and having the better game for 3 quarters and getting the better stats and throwing more touchdowns and blah, 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 blah. But he throws a couple picks against a good defense and Tua just does enough to not lose the game. So I think going into this, the Dolphins are my favourites because of that defense. I think Tua is going to become, from what I've seen of him and from what he was in college, I don't necessarily think Tua is electric in the same way that Herbert has got the potential to be electric and just throw loads and loads of yards. But Tua, to me, is going to become more of a really solid game manager who doesn't turn the ball over. And I hate using the word game manager because that sounds like a negative, but it's really not. I mean, the quarterbacks that do well in the league don't turn the ball over. I mean, Russell Wilson's biggest thing over the last couple games, for all of the great plays he's made, it's not about how many great plays you make, it's about how many bad plays you don't make. So if you can not turn the ball over, which I think Tua is going to be very good at not turning the ball over, you'll win games. And I think that's their win condition here, is just simple. Don't ask him to do more than he has to do. Play good defense, march down the field, lean on the run, and they can come out of this with the win.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought the defense up here because I think it's quite key to this battle. This Dolphins defense, and this further to your point, Sam, as well, they've allowed the 5th fewest points per game at 20.1. Which, yeah, when you line it up with a young rookie quarterback, is going to go hand in hand for a tough day for him, I reckon. And on the flip side as well, the Chargers have given up 29 points 5 games in a row now. So they're a bit more leaky than the other defense of the Chargers. So I think it's prime for Tua to have the better game here, in my opinion, which leads me to believe that, you know, I'll be taking the Dolphins on the spread for sure at -2.5. Right, okay, let's keep it cracking, keep it moving. And we've got a nice little AFC North matchup that sees the Bengals go into Pittsburgh to play the unbeaten Steelers. Unbeaten on the season. Almost a little rough one last week against the Cowboys. That was strange to see, although I feel like it's more the Steelers playing down to their opposition as they have a habit of doing on occasion. So I'm less worried about that. But do you reckon maybe the Bengals could take advantage of that happening again and get the win there? I see, Sam, you're nodding a little bit there. Do you agree?
I actually think the Bengals have a shot at winning this game because the Steelers are, they're 8-0 now. First time in franchise history, or 9-0 even. First time in franchise history, they're They are probably the best team in the NFL at the moment when everyone is healthy. We don't know what the status of Big Ben is 100% at the moment. Obviously, he went out in that game, came back. I'm unwilling to kind of say that I'm 100% certain that he's going to be at full health. Obviously, when he came back into the game, he looked great and he was throwing the rock, but you could see that he was limping and he wasn't. Yeah. So, I mean, if Big Ben doesn't play, this is a completely different team. It's the same question as last year. If Big Ben doesn't play, then they are a lot worse because they have maybe the worst backup situation in the league. There's no need to get into that. Anyone who knows anything about the NFL watched them play last year with their assortment of quarterbacks and knows the kind of struggle they were in. I mean, you've got a team that's 9-0 this year, effectively without the quarterback, the same team last year, and they went 8-8. So I think the Bengals, because Joe Burrow and that offense can get the ball rolling. Their defense has shown in big games this year that they can play up to it. So I'm not necessarily saying the Bengals win, but the spread at +8 for the Bengals here, I think I'm taking that in all of my bets this weekend just because I'm really, really confident that the Bengals are going to cover that spread.
Oh, I think the big thing for me, though, talking about Big Ben, does he play, does he not, is Vance McDonald, positive test for COVID. Big Ben is one of the guys that's high risk. He is not in. He has to. It's the same as Matt Stafford. He's got to have those 5 straight pass tests. So, I think realistically, in terms of how much he practices, I don't think it changes a massive amount because they're going to want to be really resting him for whatever happened to his knee there. I think even so potentially there was issues with both knees. He was feeling them both. So on that front, it doesn't change it a massive amount. But if he has another couple failed tests in here, he's out, regardless of whether he's physically can play or not. I think that's a massive stat for me. Whereas the Bengals, as you just said, every reason you've just said, I won't be shocked if they put it up. But I think for me, this was a weird game. This Cowboys was an anomaly on the season. I think the Bengals look all right. I think they put up some points. But I think as long as Big Ben's out there, the Steelers roll through this and just kind of keep on trucking, keep on moving. But again, I won't be shocked. Who knows? Maybe they just start playing down. Then it almost this undefeated thing you've seen in all sports. When a team is undefeated, sometimes that starts to take priority in the players' heads over other things. The fundamentals slip. Some get cocky. Some get nervous. It's a whole other psychological deal going on. That these teams, you think, it should be a win, especially one that, I mean, hey, Joe Burrow, he's a guy, he loves to win. And think how much just for him to really kind of start making his name, come out and put that only loss on the Steelers in division. He'll make himself a hero with the fans straight away down there. Yeah, exactly. Like, instantly. Yeah. And there's storylines behind it. And the NFL is a storyline-driven sport sometimes. It feels that way. But I think if I'm betting, as long as Big Ben's out there, so I'm leaving this until Sunday, what will be Sunday evening for us, I'll be taking them on that spread at -8.
The Steelers have not been comfortably covering their spreads the last couple of weeks. They've been...
I think they do here, though. Yeah. I don't think this Bengals defense is in a great spot. I think Burrow is what is really having to carry them. And this Steelers defense, regardless of Big Ben, is going to be there and they're going to be coming for him. And we've seen at points here, Joe Burrow's been beaten this season.
Oh, yeah,
that O-line has not been great. So you put them against that Steelers D-line, he might not even get a chance to get going. Yeah. So I think just off that, I'd take the Steelers. But the second Big Ben's out, all bets are off in this game.
So I don't think he's as big of a loss as maybe we're thinking of here.
Have you watched Mason Rudolph try and play the game of football?
Now, hear me out. You mentioned the Bengals' defense being poor. They're 4th worst against the run. Yeah, but... So if James Conner can be relied on, which hit and miss over times, but if he can be relied on, which I think he has got it in his locker, then he could lead to victory. That would put in question the spread for sure for me at that point, definitely. But definitely moneyline, I'd be taking the Steelers regardless. But again, Matt, you mentioned it there, that Steelers defense, I mean, they're just another force to be reckoned with, and Joe Burrow is likely to struggle against that, especially if he can't stay up, like you said. So a bit nervous for him going to this one, but also looking forward to potentially a big game for James Conner in this matchup, which...
It's interesting you
Could be
say
set
that.
for him.
It's
Could be
interesting
set
you say that because I think that maybe the biggest question this Steelers team has at the moment is their run game. They're really struggling to get it going. You could see at the weekend, James Conner, they don't trust him. He only got 6 carries, and even when they're in a spot on the coming towards the goal line, they're managing the clock, so they just want to get the ball into the end zone. They weren't even lining up with any of their running backs on the field. They were just going empty set. The Big Ben in the shotgun with 4 wide receivers out, and they did that 5 plays back to back to back, marching down the field. Even in game scripts that would suggest you want a running back on the field, they just don't have the faith in him.
Well, arguably that game was very similar, but another very bad run defense. So you can see it, but you'd hope they'd have the intelligence to learn from their mistakes and lean on the run a bit more. And like I said at the top of this preview for this game, they just seem to play to teams' levels at times, and that Cowboys game just screamed, "We're playing to your level." So yeah, I'm less concerned about that, but it does rely on James Conner being decent again, because there is question marks around that. But I think he can do it this game. As a Ravens fan, I hope he can't, but see what happens.
A little jump in on this as well around the Bengals. Won't affect this week. We also saw Pat McKinley waived by the Falcons. He's been picked up by the Bengals. It's just come out while we're recording this. So with Dunlap being traded away, he's gone from there. McKinley can come in, hopefully fill that gap for them. Point to prove. Interesting, replace an unsettled player with someone else who's been unsettled. We'll see how that pans out for him, but I'm just an interesting one to note for the weeks going forward.
Nice
point there to note, but maybe give Sparrow a little bit of a help. Means it's not as much just on him. Defense can start to get something going and kind of make it a little bit easier on him.
Matt Schefter there. Thank you for that.
I was going to say,
dropping live.
2 weeks in a row, you've dropped a little Robinson bomb there to provide us some breaking news. We'd love to see it. Keep them coming, Matt. Keep them coming. Right, let's crack on into another 9:25 matchup that sees the Seahawks go in to play the Rams. Now, the Rams are actually favourites for this game at -1.5. Now, I've hammered the Seahawks defense all season in every single episode pretty much. Their pass defense is atrocious, worse in the league. Do you boys reckon that is what is potentially could ruin their season?
Yes and no. Just because, look, it's a problem, right? And if they've got a better defense, then I think a lot of these games that they've lost this year, or that they've been close to losing, probably aren't as close, right? The issue that they have, and I think this is maybe the issue for Russ, and it's the positive for Russ and the negative. The reason that everyone puts him in that MVP conversation, because pretty much everything they do revolves around him. Yes, they've got great players on offense, but it's always Russ making the play. It's like Russ to DK, or DK does something mad. But I mean, a lot of this hinges on Russell Wilson, right? And a lot of these losses get put on Russell Wilson because it's like, oh, well, you threw 3 picks or you threw 2 picks. And I think he's thrown 5 picks in the last 2 games, right? Which is not good enough, right? If you want to go all the way and you want to be a real contender. So, yes, the pass defense is an issue, and it's meaning that they're making these games harder on themselves, because it makes those mistakes by Russell Wilson so much more crucial, because 1 pick means you've got to score on every possession. But I think realistically, if Russ can cut those interceptions out, they can still score a lot of points and outscore most teams in the league. You need Russell Wilson needs to be playing at an MVP level for this team to be relevant, and I believe he can get back there. But against the Rams, I'm unsure. I like the Rams in this game.
This game makes me nervous for the Seahawks a little bit, and for Russ. I mean, we talked about the difference in Tua against Rams and Cardinals. He's just coming off of a nightmare game against the Bills. I think when I was watching it, I was like, I feel like I'm watching Jameis Winston with a better ceiling and a better arm. But the mistakes and the things that was happening, like absolutely throwing and coming up with great throws here and there, and then just, he's lost the ball again. It was a really uncharacteristic performance. You see this from big quarterbacks here and there. It's going to happen. They can't be perfect all the time. And the times where they are, their team normally wins the Super Bowl, or at least gets very near to it. So it could be a bounce back game. But against this Rams defense, the Rams are just well coached. They're one of those teams that you know they're going to come out and be prepared. And I think they're going to watch that and wouldn't be shocked if they pick up on a couple things maybe they can try and do at the defensive side of the ball. And I mean, couple fumbles from Russ. If you're getting hit by Aaron Donald and you're fumbling against some other players in the league, I think he's one of the most likely to make you fumble. Just a freak athlete. Yeah. I'm leaning Rams here as well. But again, it's a difficult game to call. Just because the Seahawks, you know how they can play. And if Russ comes out and has one of his near perfect games and just is on an absolute, just the same page as Metcalf and Lockett, put him up against a lot of defenses. That's tough to stop.
The Rams do also have a tendency to kind of... They either play offensively, they either hit their groove and they have a great game, or they don't hit their groove and they just achieve nothing. So it very much depends on kind of which Jared Goff you get. Does Jared Goff come out and he's hitting on everything, or does you get the Jared Goff who comes out and he's really shaky on third down? So if Jared Goff comes out, he's good on third down, and they are coached and everything kind of goes the Rams' way, then I'm taking the Rams really comfortably, just because I think they're probably the better team all round. So I am taking them, but there is always the Russell Wilson factor, because Russell Wilson is probably the most dynamic at this point quarterback in the league when he's playing at his best.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Russell Wilson factor, because I was looking at the stats for the Rams defense and seeing maybe if there's an in there at all, maybe it makes it a bit more obvious who to pick. But the Rams are number 2 against the pass and number 5 against the run for their defense. Now that is a very good spot to be in. But of course, like you mentioned there, Sam, there is the Russell Wilson factor, where if he can play to his absolute best, it doesn't really matter where their defense is. He's just going to look amazing. But that Seahawks defense, man, it just kills me every time I have to talk about it. It's just terrible. So yeah, I'm backing the Rams on the spread here, minus 1.5. Slight coin flip game, this one, I think, but that's just because of the nature of the Seahawks defense, in all honesty. Yeah. But yeah, I'll be taking the Rams as well for this one. Right.
I think keep an eye on those stat lines for Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, because I think if Goff has even an average game, I think that's all it will need against that Seahawks defense, and those two could have just one of them especially, but potentially even both, could have big numbers this week.
Yeah. Watch out for my guy. Watch out for my guy this week, because I've already got some potentially lined up with the Rams there, which I haven't told you boys yet. But
James taking a receiver against the Seahawks for his my guy.
Nice and original.
Could have been a quarterback. Who knows?
Set your clock by it.
Who knows? But yeah, check out that episode. It's coming out on Saturday morning to see who our my guys are. But right, let's get back to the previews, and let's talk about the final 9 p.m. game that's happening this week. And it sees the 49ers go into New Orleans to play the Saints. The Saints, of course, off the back of that mega win against the Bucs, which we all love to see. And they looked impressive last week, as we sort of mentioned earlier. And the 49ers are just still being plagued by injuries. Chance that Jimmy G, I think Jimmy G's pretty much out for this game, actually.
Jimmy G's out. I believe Nick Mullins is going to start.
Yeah.
Nick Mullins is going to start. So, can you guys see anything but a Saints win on this one? Because I certainly can't.
No.
Nah, this will be similar to what we saw. It's obviously later window game, but Packers against the Niners, just easy for the Packers this week. I'm expecting similar. I don't think the Saints will be sweating this one too much. I think they'll just get in a comfortable spot. We all know the backs they've got in that backfield. If they get up, they can afford to just take the run plays when they need to. If they're maybe a third and a little bit longer, Michael Thomas across the middle. I think it's going to be the Saints hitting their rhythm. I think now that they've got Michael Thomas back in, they've got everything they need there. Can start to roll. People are going to, I think, be less harsh on Breeze, because he's going to be able to settle back into. He's got his little safety blanket there. So yeah, I think they just keep moving. And the confidence, like the videos of them in that locker room after that Bucs win, this team is feeling themselves now. And that's a dangerous thing with this much talent on a team.
Mostert as well, just seen a little notification pop up on the phone. Ooh. Mostert will not be back, so it doesn't look like he is playing. I think Kyle Shanahan's a little wary to get him in.
Another one.
Loses some needed explosiveness in that backfield.
Yeah, and to be honest, the way that Saints defense played against the Buccaneers of all teams does not fill you with confidence to turn around and say, yeah, Nick Mullins is going to come out and win in a shootout or put up points. So I think kind of like Matt said, that the Saints' win condition is very obvious. Like, just play defense, run the ball, get it to Michael Thomas. Don't ask Drew Brees to do anything ridiculous, like throw it deep. You've got your safety net there, and they'll probably be able to put up 25 to 30 points without even breaking a sweat. and I can't see the Niners moving the ball. So locking up the Saints, really, I'd take them. I'd take them with the spread. One thing I wouldn't do is I'd probably take the under in this game, just because I think the Niners could really struggle offensively.
Yeah, obviously the under over being 51 for that one, and I agree with everything you just said there. There's no more points for me to add, really. It's for me, it's exactly the same. Saints on the spread. It's got to be too many injuries for the 49ers to do anything productive in this game for me. Right, okay, there's a nice little Sunday night football matchup. It sees the Ravens going to play the Patriots. Now, the Ravens, of course, got the win against the Colts, and the Patriots only just beat the Jets last week.
Scraped by
How embarrassing is that?
Last minute field goal, and that is against one of the worst teams in football right now. And they're going in to play the worst team. Okay,
even counting college football,
maybe some
high schools.
I was being Div 2 as well.
I wouldn't call it a football team, really.
So they beat the group
of practice squad that gets to play on Sundays.
They beat the group of men last week.
A well-paid practice squad.
Yeah,
but I mean, that is the worst team in the NFL, and they're going in to play one of the best teams in the NFL right now, arguably. How concerned are we for this Patriots team, and how excited are we to see the spread being at -7 in favour of the Ravens?
Yeah,
it does. It's an odd spread. I think this could have been double figures for me.
Yeah.
I think the only reason it's not is the Ravens' offense has started a little bit at points. It doesn't. I think they set such a high bar that if they're not an elite offense and they're not lights out, that you think, oh, offense isn't doing great. It's not. It's still a good offense. It's just not what it was last year, which was just
record-setting.
If they had done statistically, it's just not going to happen. You don't get that many almost career years for a whole team back to back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
So it's just odd because the Patriots team, I don't know, Cam Newton looked a bit better, throwing it around a bit to not a bunch of names on the other end of those passes, sort of compared to what you've seen in New England before. So maybe that's what they've done with this spread, but I think this is a great money. Get some money here, boys. Just get your money in on this, I think. And that's probably going to not happen now I've said that. But get your money on this and wake up to a nice little present Monday morning.
Yeah.
Great way to start your week with a winning bet coming in, probably.
Yeah, I'd be taking the spread and looking for the Ravens to cover. The spread-wise, the over-under is a really tricky one for me because 41.5. I don't see the Ravens scoring an outrageous number of points here. I think maybe somewhere around 30 points, right? So not like stupid, but I really don't see the Patriots scoring any points. Like if the Patriots got blown out here and put up nothing, I would not be shocked. This is a good Ravens defense going up against a Patriots offense that has struggled all season long, and the only times they have looked good is when they're up against kind of inferior opponents, which the Ravens aren't. So I would be the one tip I'd have, because there's not much to say football-wise around this game. Everyone knows the Ravens should win outside of something that we can't really logically predict. The one thing I would say is avoid the over-under on this game because it's so low at 41.5, but I'm still not confident that gets hit just because I could see this being a 30-0 type affair.
That's surprising for me. I'd be taking it here. I think the Patriots team, I'm not saying they're going to put up a ton of points, but I'm saying they can move the ball enough to maybe get a few field goals here. It's something we've seen, like in the Bills game, that's sort of partly how they were keeping in it. And I think Cam looked a bit better, starting to kind of recover. Obviously, it was against the Jets. I'm not saying they're going to come up and put up 30 points, but I could see them getting up to around that 10 mark. And then you're saying low 30 points for this Ravens team. Yeah, I can see that. So for me, I think it's so low. If this was at 44, 45, probably not.
Yeah.
In fact, it's 41.5. But it's one of those that I'll put a bit on, maybe mix it in with a few other bets, kind of up it. But not expecting, but it's one that I think could get you a nice little reward. If you kind of need something just to up your odds a bit, get another game in your parlay. Something that I'd be looking at, I think, because it's just so low.
Yeah.
It's one of the lowest things we've seen all season, and this year is a high-scoring season.
That over-under, yeah, it is. But I think that over-under with that team, that's got, you know, every week you have that massive parlay that comes in, and you are one result away, and it's always the one that you thought was a lock.
Can anyone tell that Sam lost a big bet this week? It might have involved James Conner.
By one.
Don't know if anyone might have noticed. Just to
He's not
throw that one in there.
Joke. I mean, all he needed was a touchdown. All he needed is one touchdown. They're on the
moving.
8-yard line, and he's not even on the field.
Didn't help that as Sam had this happen in my bet came in.
Oh,
I
man,
love to see it.
I mean, me and Sam,
fuming.
we don't normally root for each other.
Oh,
but even I was there like, I want James Conner to get in the end zone just because I could see what he was doing to him. He was crushed.
Oh,
He wasn't even on the field.
You love to see it.
But bringing it back to this game, of course, I'm sort of with you on this one, Matt, because it's so low, that under-over. And with potentially Calais Campbell being out for this game, makes a bit of a difference there, perhaps. Another injury for the Ravens to deal with on that D-line. You can see the Patriots putting up points. Not a lot, but enough to cover the under-over. But like Sam said, the Ravens have it in their locker to blow people out. It's happened a few times in the Lamar Jackson era especially.
Very true.
So it can happen, but because it's so low, I'm willing to take it. Because even in those blowout games, they're getting around the high 30 marks anyway. So you can see it happening. Maybe they might cover it on their own, who knows. But yeah, I'll be taking the Ravens for this one for sure on the spread. And yeah, I'll be taking the over as well. That 41 is just way too low for me to bet against at this point in time. Right, final game of the week, lads. It's a Monday night football game as ever. And it sees the Minnesota Vikings going in to play the Bears, the Chicago Bears. And these are two teams on different trajectories completely. The Bears are just like sliding down. We talked about the run of games that they have before, and it looks like they are struggling in that run. And the Vikings seem to be climbing up a little bit. They got a nice little win against the Lions last week. Is this just one of those games that trend is just going to go like that, and it's just going to work in the Vikings' favour?
This is a difficult one because this Vikings turnaround, as I guess you could call it, Dalvin Cook, it's on his back. Quite literally, he's carrying this team, and the rest of the team is just doing enough around him to say, we're happy for you to go out there and run for 200 yards and however many touchdowns you want a game. We're going to do everything around that you need. We're going to make this happen for you. But this Bears team, it's not an easy team to run the ball on, to really do anything on. They're disruptive. They're a difficult team to play against, but teams are starting to figure it out now, I think. And the Bears' offense is it's not enough. It had a few good weeks, I think, at the start of the season that meant it kind of did enough that the defense didn't have to literally almost pitch a shutout, like get a shutout on the other team to get the win. But now they're starting to get figured out. I think Trubisky's the better option than Foles. That's a whole other debate we could get into, but I still think that was the wrong move. When you were unbeaten, why swap your quarterback? You roll it until the wheels fall off, I think. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole other debate. But within this matchup specifically, this was almost going to be my lock. It's just that, I don't know, it being a primetime game, you got Kirk Cousins and you got a Bears defense that's good against the run.
Yes.
Oh, there's a lot of things that make you kind of want to stay away, but I'd still say if I'm betting on this, I'm betting with the Vikings at minus 2.5. I'm comfortable with that. I think it's going to be a close, low-scoring, scrappy game, though. So I think I'm not going anywhere near the over-under. But again, I won't be shocked if I wake up and see that the Bears have clawed out a victory and have kind of gone back to what they did at the start of the season when you just keep looking at the result like, really? Again?
Yeah.
But
I think
it's a tough one.
This is a game, I think, that comes down to ultimately who's got the better playmakers. I mean, both teams are actually pretty well coached, in my opinion. They've both got good coaches. They've both got some talent. I think at the end of the day, the Vikings just have more offensive firepower than the Bears. I don't think Foles is the answer at quarterback. And I agree with Matt that I think Trubisky should be in there. I think he's actually a little bit more dynamic. Okay, he's not as accurate, but he's a bit more dynamic. He offers a little bit more, in my opinion. But I think that just says everything about that quarterback room because I don't think either of them are the option, are the real long-term answer there. And the only player on this Bears team that I think is offensively like a legitimate, proper weapon is Allen Robinson. And you've got to feel bad for the guy. His entire 100%. NFL career, he's played with no one really throwing him the ball. He went from Blake Bortles and all that in Jacksonville over to Chicago, and you feel bad for the guy. I agree that the Bears have a good run defense, and they will make it difficult for Dalvin Cook. But Dalvin Cook can do a lot of damage in the pass game as well, and we've seen that in the last couple of weeks. He isn't just a running threat, and I think because he has been so dominant in the last couple of weeks, teams are going to spend more time going, right, we just need to stop him, which I think is going to open up some avenues for Thielen, who I think has quietly, while he might not have had the best statistical season, he's kind of remained at a decent high-level slot receiver. He is one of the better slot receivers in the league still, and they've got a number of other guys who are going to be good enough to get the job done. And I think James really summed it up when he introduced the game. The Vikings are on the upwards. They're scoring points. They're beating good teams. I mean, they've 2 weeks removed from beating the Packers. And the Bears are trending back to what they really are, which is an 8-8 team who are going to beat some teams and lose to other teams. So I think the Vikings win this, and I'm taking them at -2.5 quite comfortably.
Yeah, it seems to be a bad time for the Vikings to play the Bears at this point. For the Bears to play the Vikings at this point, rather. But yeah, I think, like you said there, Sam, the offensive weapons the Vikings have got far outweighs what the Bears have, and like we've mentioned a few times now, the Vikings are on the up. You can't look past them at this point, especially when they're playing a Bears team who are on the down. So I'm taking the Vikings on the spread at -2.5. I'm quite comfortable doing that, but hey, I have to wait and see what happens, right?
Hey,
any given Sunday,
I have to get that in there. But that just about concludes our Week 10 preview. Of course, there's 4 teams not playing this week who are on a bye. So unfortunately, we won't get to see the Chiefs play. And fortunately, we won't get to see the Cowboys, Falcons or Jets play this week. As they're all on byes. So that's why we haven't mentioned those teams.
I wonder what Adam Gase is doing on his bye week.
Probably
looking for a new job.
I'm sure he's
CV.
still finding a way to ruin somebody's weekend.
It's probably like Googling how to coach a football team or something like that. And I'm learning
coaching football for dummies.
Yeah.
Just learns how to coach like soccer or football rather than by accident, because he is dumb. Sorry, Adam Gase. But anyway, that just about concludes this week's episode. So as ever, be sure to head over to YouTube, go like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check us out on both Twitter and Instagram. We are at the Brit Iron. Starting a little community over there, so want you guys to go and get involved on both of those platforms. But thank you for listening for now, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.